Good evening. Welcome to the Evening Review this evening. I'm your host, Jemima Beatrice. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Welcome back. I'm your host, Jemima Beatrice. This evening we'll speak to Sharonice Busch, the Executive Chairperson of the National Youth Council of Namibia. She will be talking to us about a number of issues, including the much talked about Slut Talk. Thank you for joining us, Sharonice.
Thank you, Jemima, and good evening to the viewers.
Now, Sharonice, let's start with NYC and your predecessor, the late Mandela Kapere. What do you think was the legacy that he has left behind?
Thank you, Jemima. Mandela took over at the helm of the National Youth Council in 2010 when he was elected at the General Assembly that took place at the University of Namibia. At an institutional level, Mandela left behind an institution that he transformed from just a youth organization into a public enterprise that now operates under an act that informs the work that we do. Mandela, during his time, also ensured that NYC elevated in terms of how we approach youth development and youth work, just from the ordinary activism to ensuring that there is policy interventions that informs the manner in which we deal with youth work in the country. Mandela also, Jemima, in my view, ensured that NYC created strong bilateral relationship with institutions on the African continent and beyond. We have relationships today with the Pan-African Youth Union. We have relationships with the African Union, with the United Nations, with WUFTI, and so forth. So really, that really speaks to the leadership of Mandela Kapere at an institutional level. Also, just to reflect on the character of Mandela, that really is the reason why he's referred to by many of us as an extraordinary personality when it comes to the generation and the youth that he led and served, is really, Jemima, that Mandela unified young people beyond political divides and political lines. And with that goes a saying that says that when a man leaves behind an inheritance, when a good man leaves behind an inheritance, he leaves it for one generation, but an extraordinary man will leave it behind for 3 or more generations. And Mandela was that man that left behind an inheritance for 3 or more generations. Mandela inspired and mentored young people today, of whom are regional governors, of whom are in our National Assembly as young parliamentarians. And that really speaks to the character of Mandela. He's a unifier. Most of the young people will always refer to him as a diplomat because he had such extraordinary listening skills, regardless of who you were. He would always give you that ear to be heard, but also to listen, guide and counsel young people. And really that, to me, is how I will sum up Mandela's legacy.
Now, you've worked very closely with the late Kapere. Now, you are in this hot seat now. What legacy would you like to leave behind? Essentially, what I'm asking is, what strategic direction do you want to take the institution to?
Thank you, Jemima. Jemima, last year, when the interested contestants for this position, when we were all campaigning, I really rallied with a message that I still stand by till today. And it's one that I would want the young people to hold me accountable for when I'm done with my tenure. And what I've said then last year, November, Jemima, is what I'd like to repeat now for the benefit of the nation, which is to say that I want an inclusive National Youth Council, and a youth council that can facilitate opportunity, that can facilitate resources to the young people of the country. But above all, Jemima, a youth council that is responsive and relevant to the issues that young people are facing today. And this for me is very important because in the youth demographic, Jemima, you enter the youth demographic, but you also exit it. And in the youth demographic ourselves, we've got a new generation that has emerged, who this generation are the millennials. And it is our job as the flagship youth development agency of government to ensure that in our programming, the work that we do, the interventions that we want to have as an agency really responds to the current needs of youth. And that for me is really how I'd want to be remembered for when I leave the NYC.
Now, in your view, what are the challenges and the issues that face this generation? The millennial, they call themselves the Generation X. What, in your view, are the issues that are facing them?
The issues that are facing us is, firstly, this generation is also the generation that is called the informed generation. This is a generation that lives on digital space, that has got access to information. This is also the generation that is considered the generation that has gone through formal training, formal education. And one of the biggest challenges with this generation, Jemima, is innovation, in the sense that opportunities are not there for all of us as young people. And this is a generation that must innovate, because I want to link it, for instance, to the issue of youth unemployment. The millennials will be the generation that have got the qualifications, the degrees, but the labor market cannot absorb all of us. So this is the generation that will need to use innovation to ensure that they become job creators and not job seekers. This is the generation that must use innovation to ensure that we come up with solutions to the challenges that we face, solutions that are creative, solutions that are a first of its kind, because of the fact that we are I would like to not call myself a millennial, but I'm from the generation of the 90s, the born frees. But still relatively close to it is that it's the generation that is linked to the futuristic approaches that the world is taking. And with that, it's also something that President also passionately speaks about, as the generation that will be challenged with artificial intelligence, Industry 4.0. And that's the biggest challenge, in my view, that this generation is threatened with.
Do you believe the NYC is ready to satisfy the needs of this specific group of people?
I believe that is something that I'd want to take up upon myself, to ensure that our programming, the corporate culture, and above all, the understanding of the direction that NYC must take starts at an administrative level, right? So first you need to ensure that there's a paradigm shift with those that create the programs, those that run the institution on a day-to-day basis. When the shift starts there, only then can you see through the interventions that it's really relevant, that it's responsive, and that it correlates to what is the situation on the ground for young people.
Now, speaking about the young people, speaking about the programs that the NYC is busy with, now let's move to the much talked about Youth Week and the controversial youth talk. Now, there's been so much said about this. Can you share with us what is the motivation behind this concept?
Thank you. Jemima, it's important to also mention that the National Youth Week is a statutory provision that we derive from the National Youth Act. So the Act makes provision that there shall be a day which young people can observe and celebrate themselves as young people, and this day shall be called the National Youth Day. It also makes provision that the National Youth Week shall observe and celebrate a week to celebrate young people in the last week of April, and that week shall be called the National Youth Week. So that is very important to establish, because it's a provision as per our Act that we are mandated to observe and celebrate our aspirations and who we are as young people collectively. In the past, Jemima, the National Youth Week has celebrated National Youth Week based on various issues that affects young people. This is very important because of the context in which I'd like to discuss the theme of this year's National Youth Week. Jemima, in 2020, the National Youth Week was celebrated under the theme COVID-19, the youth's response to it. In 2019, it was celebrated The theme was celebrated looking at environment, and the list goes on. And this year, the theme is looking at gender-based violence. The youth igniting a zero tolerance towards gender-based violence. And this is informed, Jemima, through the conversation that is currently happening in the country with regards to gender-based violence, but also because statistics informs us that there's a national emergency when it comes to gender-based violence. Last year at the General Assembly, I must also emphasize that we did have a theme that was focused around gender-based violence, but the National Youth Council's board, of which I lead and I'm a part of, felt that because our General Assembly was hit with the death of Mandela Kapere, but because also it was during a political contestation, and the mood was more linked to the elective processes than really just deliberating and coming up with tangible outputs that the NYC need to run for the next 4 years. The board then resolved at our first ordinary meeting that we go again, that we use the theme that we had at the General Assembly and observe it, because the crisis still remains in the country when it comes to gender-based violence. And that is how then the theme was adopted and approved for us to say that this year our theme will be igniting a zero tolerance as young people towards gender-based violence. Jemima, I'd also want to just emphasize that when you look at the statistics, they do not lie. Between September 2019 to September 2020, 6,000 GBV cases were reported at the GBV Protection Unit. 800 rape cases were reported, Jemima, and 74 cases were GBV related. And therefore, as young people, we recognize that we have a very serious role to play when it comes to addressing gender-based violence, but also ensuring that our interventions are meaningful and really have impact at the end of the day. And is on this national urgency, informed by the evidence that we have in front of us, the statistics, because these incidences, Jemima, is happening in our homes, it's happening in our communities. It is on this basis then that the NYC said, this year we want to have this theme, we want to observe it, but we also want to ensure that we create awareness around why we have this theme and why the approaches we are taking this year.
So can you tell us what is happening during the Youth Week? And also tell us why Slut Talk and why is it taking place in a bar?
Thank you. Jemima, this week we've got a host of activities and I'm really proud of it and I'm really excited, and I really look forward to the official launch, which will take place tomorrow. So tomorrow is the official launch of the National Youth Week. This launch will be taking place from the UN Plaza in Karatura, where we will have a march with young people, ourselves and the young people in the structures of the council, and anyone who would like to join us, from the UN Plaza to the GBV Protection Unit. And the official launch of the Youth Week will take place at the GBV Protection Unit. Why we're doing it there is really to elevate the importance of why the GBV Protection Unit really exists. Not only to survivors, but really just also to change the appeal of the GBV Protection Unit. So what we will be doing there is they've also granted us a blank wall where the young people from College of the Arts will be coming to draw mural paintings on. And that really is the signature of NYC at the GBV Protection Unit, just to give our message, to say that we not only stand in solidarity with the work that you do, but really to create a new appeal of that specific institution and what they represent. That is on the Tuesday. On the Wednesday, it is important also for me to mention, Jemima, that National Youth Council is celebrating National Youth Week not only in the Khomas region. So through our structures, we have the regional youth forums. Regional youth forums is the regional footprint that we have in the 14 regions and 121 constituencies. National Youth Week will be celebrated in all 14 regions, including the Khomas region. We have given resources to each region to celebrate their own activities. Why this is important is that we do not want to dictate how you need to celebrate how do you need to celebrate the Youth Week in context of GBV and the zero tolerance that we want to have. But it's very important, Jemima, because the reality on the ground is different. region to region, right? So the situation in Omaheke is not the same as the situation in Kavango East, Zambezi, Ohangwena, Erongo, or Karas. Therefore, we've given them the resources to ensure that they have their own activities, but it must be really responsive and relevant to the situation on the ground. And in Khomas, they will be celebrating their Youth Week then on Wednesday, where they will be having their own host of activities in the Samora Machel constituency. I'll be joining them as well. And then in the evening, we have the men's conference. So the men's conference, Jemima, as you know, has been spoken about in a social media context through a hashtag. It is basically, if I can just define what a men's conference is, it's where the gents would want to come together to talk about how to be better gents and how to treat women better. That is how lightly we've discussed it on social media as young people using the hashtag look out for the men's conference and so forth and so forth. As a National Youth Council, we then said, why not have an actual men's conference? Why not take it to a social setting where the men chat on a regular day when they want to have fun and where they are relaxed at a sports bar? And that is the approach that we took when we programmed the host of activities that we are having this week. So the men's conference then will take place at Supporters Bar. It is also important to understand that, Jemima, that NYC is not buying alcohol for young people. We are not promoting alcoholism. What we are doing, we are going to the venues. We're going to venues that are deliberately chosen, because these are the venues, Jemima, where gender-based violence perpetrators are. These are the venues, Jemima, where gender-based violence occurs. This is where rape culture, Jemima, breeds. This is where rape often occurs. So we are going to that venues. We want to have uncomfortable conversations because we feel that in going to these venues, we will hope to make a positive impact at the end of the day. So there will be a men's conference at Supporters Bar. The men that will be talking, but also the men that we've invited is from our broader society. So you've got young leaders that are coming, but you also have recognized men in society that are viewed as have done well for themselves, just to come together. And what do we want to achieve at the end of this conversation is we hope that at the men's conference they can address positive masculinity. We want them to speak about patriarchy, and we really want them to have an honest and uncomfortable conversation among themselves at the end of the day, where we can also then, and this will be documented, where we can also then say, we felt that we've done something different, but also meaningful. And then I think the most talked about one, Gemma, on the Thursday, we will then also have the youth brunch. Youth Leaders Brunch. So the Youth Leaders Brunch, Jemima, is where we will be offering training, gender-based violence training, to youth leaders from within the structures of the NYC, and also youth leaders that are doing work centered around gender-based violence. And the training, Jemima, is really to equip them on how to deal with their programming at organizational level, at grassroots level, to better equip them to understand gender-based violence, in so doing, inform the kind of work that they'll be doing that must benefit the constituencies that they serve. And then finally, Jemima, I think it's the most talked about event is the Friday evenings event, which is called the Slut Night. So when I've been observing the reaction and comments on social media, the first issue is why the wording? Why the word slut? You could have used a different word, Sharonice, and the leadership at the council or the organizers of this event. But this is very important, Jemima, because this is exactly the kind of conversation that we also wanted to have as a National Youth Council when we are looking at gender-based violence. So really, Jemima, we must ask ourselves then, what does the word slut mean? Because I think this has ignited a national conversation which we as the National Youth Council really appreciate. The word slut, Jemima, is used to demonize. It's used to humiliate and devalue women. And Jemima, this is something that is said in our local vernaculars. We know it from Afrikaans to Oshierero to Oshiowambo. Women are called these words on a daily. And the intention of these words is to control us. It is to put us in our place. So we were deliberate to say that we need to have a night then, which we want to address the issue of slut-shaming women that exists in Namibia. And that is why we called it a Slut Night. So at this night, we are going to the brewers as where the young people congregate. The event will be upstairs at the lounge on the roof, because we are aware that there are different settings in the brewers, but we want to have a conversation where people can actually pay attention to, but also again in the space where they are, where this takes place. So we'll be at the brewers in the lounge area upstairs, and we'll be having this conversation. This conversation is open to the young woman, right? And what we want to achieve when we are having this conversation at the brewers with young women is we want to take this word back. We want to own it. We do not want this word to represent that, the negative connotations that is attached to it. We want to take back the bodily autonomy that comes with this word. And we want to address the patriarchy and the misogyny that is attached to this word. And that is why we said we want to call it for what it is, because we need to speak about it in order to change it. And the conversation must happen by addressing the root causes of it, Jemima. And that is why we felt it's a conversation that is uncomfortable, but it's a necessary one we must have as a nation if we want to move forward. So at the end of this conversation, Jemima, really what we want to document what we've done this week that must inform the programming that the NYC is going to undertake for the rest of the tenure that I'm in office, but also to share with the nation really what did we mean when we meant Slut Night, because it's on everyone's, it's on everyone's minds. What do they mean? What is the intention? Why at the Brewers Market? So it will be documented, also just to share then afterwards how this entire experience has been.
So Sharonice, the big issue out there was how does slut shaming keep women from economic opportunities? In other words, how will this slut talk enable young women to be able to participate in economic opportunities?
Jemima, you're asking a very important conversation. What we must understand is that the playing ground for women and men are different. It's not leveled. Firstly, let's use a practical example, Jemima. When a young woman gets a promotion at a job and is now at management level, if not at the very top of decision making, the first thing, Jemima, a young woman or any woman is accused of is the notion that she has slept her way to the top. Will this be said by a male? Would this be said had it been a male in this instance? The answer is no. And this is exactly what the Slut Night aims to address, is to say that we need to have the same level of accountability for men and women. If we are going to say that a woman has slept her way to the top, we must be able to say with our chest proudly that a man too has slept his way to the top. If we are not going to say that a man has slept his way to the top, then we shouldn't say a woman has slept her way to the top. And that is ultimately what the Slut Night is about, is to ensure that, Jemima, we address the misogyny that exists. It exists not only in our social settings, but we also see it manifesting to leaders that are on decision-making platforms, and it's a necessary conversation. It's very uncomfortable, but it's one the country must have, because we are dealing with an emergency, and we see it every day through our local papers.
Now, lastly, before we conclude, there's also a lot of criticism. People believe that the NYC is not doing enough to create opportunities for young people, or even to uplift young entrepreneurs. Can you just talk about that briefly?
Great. So the NYC's got programs. It has a program department, and under this programs department, there are various initiatives that should uplift or better the status of young people in our society. There's the Credit for Youth in Business. It's a scheme that gives an injection to young entrepreneurs that would like to start their own businesses or that has a good business idea. The NYC currently is looking into how to better this program, especially because entrepreneurship has also become an industry where young people are experiencing a lot of barriers to entry. And as the NYC, we also want to elevate this program to ensure that we alleviate some of these barriers to entry for young people. That is a program that currently exists under the NYC. A program that the NYC will shortly launch, Jemima, is the Equipment Aid Grant Scheme, where the National Youth Council then, in each region, want to provide financial resources to young entrepreneurs to be able to buy the equipment to start their businesses. Because The reason why we want to do this is, again, because of the enormous barriers to entries that young entrepreneurs are faced with. This is a program that has got a financial value of $2.1 million. Participants are selected across the country to ensure that we're inclusive, and these participants will then be attached to the NYC to ensure that the business takes off. You are trained in terms of also financial reporting, how to write your business plans, and so forth. And at the end of the day, once we see that the project is the businesses are sustainable in its incubation phase, then we release the entrepreneurs to become active players in an economy. So in terms of opportunities and fostering economic activity, those are the two programs that I think are worthy to mention at this platform.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sharonice.
Thank you, Jemima. It was lovely to be here.